Every dollar invested creates multiplier effects across supporting industries, building infrastructure that serves the broader digital economy, regardless of specific AI application timelines. We're in the second inning of a 9-inning game, constructing capabilities that will drive productivity growth for decades. Whether that optimistic vision fully materializes or encounters significant obstacles remains to be seen. But dismissing this as just another bubble misses fundamental differences in business model viability, cash generation, infrastructure utility, and strategic imperatives driving investment. The $2 trillion AI build-out isn't masking weakness. It's building the foundation for whatever comes next.
Big technology companies are essentially doing the equivalent of building Las Vegas in the 1950s, when it was just desert sand, or Dubai 3 decades ago, when it was an undeveloped coastline. They're constructing the fundamental infrastructure, from specialized chips to massive data centers to upgraded electrical grids that will power the economy for decades. Yet some investors and economists are genuinely worried about where this trajectory leads. The concerns echo anxieties from the late 1990s. Enormous capital flowing into somewhat unproven technology, with questions about whether it ultimately produces value or just spectacular waste. A September 2025 analysis from Deutsche Bank made a startling claim. Without AI-driven investment, the United States might already be experiencing a recession. That single observation captures the central tension. Is AI infrastructure spending propping up an otherwise weak economy, creating a dangerous dependency? Or is this the beginning of a genuine productivity revolution that will drive growth for generations? What follows is an examination of why the conventional narrative about AI spending is missing critical context, why comparisons to previous bubbles are fundamentally flawed, and why this infrastructure build-out might represent something more resilient than skeptics recognize. Why this isn't the dot-com bubble redux. The comparison to the late 1990s internet boom gets invoked constantly, but the parallels break down quickly under examination. During the dot-com era, companies with minimal revenue and no clear path to profitability received billion-dollar valuations based purely on growth metrics and speculative potential. Pets.com, Webvan, and countless others burned through investor capital without ever establishing sustainable business models. Today's AI infrastructure spending comes from fundamentally different sources. The biggest technology companies driving this build-out aren't speculative startups. They're generating massive cash flows from established businesses. These organizations hold trillions in combined balance sheet assets and generate hundreds of billions in operating cash annually. They're not financing expansion primarily through unsustainable debt loads or investor speculation. They're largely self-funding through actual profits from existing operations. Yes, some companies are issuing bonds to finance portions of their infrastructure expansion, but there's a critical difference between a profitable company with diversified revenue streams using debt strategically to accelerate growth versus a speculative startup with no revenue borrowing to stay alive. The risk profiles are entirely different. If AI technology development encounters temporary setbacks or takes longer than anticipated to produce returns, companies like Microsoft and Google don't collapse. They adjust timelines and continue operating profitable core businesses. The infrastructure being built also serves multiple purposes beyond just AI. Upgraded data centers improve cloud computing services that already generate substantial revenue. Advanced networking infrastructure benefits existing internet services. Enhanced electrical grid capacity supports growing digital economy demands regardless of specific AI applications. This isn't single-purpose speculative investment. It's foundational infrastructure with diverse utility, even if some AI applications develop more slowly than optimists predict. The productivity revolution that's already happening. Here's what often gets lost in bubble comparisons. AI is already demonstrating measurable productivity gains across numerous industries right now, not in some speculative future. Software developers using AI coding assistants are completing tasks 25 to 40% faster in controlled studies. Customer service operations are handling higher volumes with better outcomes using AI-augmented workflows. Medical imaging analysis is identifying conditions earlier and more accurately when AI assists human radiologists. These aren't hypothetical benefits that might materialize eventually. They're operational improvements being measured and documented today. When analysts project that AI could automate up to 70% of routine work tasks by 2026, that's based on current capability demonstrations and deployment trajectories, not wild speculation. The technology is already working at scales sufficient to change labor economics across multiple sectors. Every dollar spent on specialized AI chips creates approximately a 10 times multiplier effect across the broader technology stack, according to industry analysis. That investment flows through to infrastructure improvements, power grid enhancements, networking upgrades, software development, and countless supporting industries. This isn't money disappearing into speculative ventures. It's capital creating tangible assets and capabilities with measurable economic outputs. Compare this to previous technology transitions. When electricity infrastructure was built out in the early 20th century, skeptics questioned whether the investment would pay off. When computing infrastructure was constructed in the 1960s and 70s, similar concerns emerged about costs versus returns. When internet infrastructure was built in the 1990s and 2000s, separate from the dot-com bubble speculation, many questioned the expense. In each case, the infrastructure created far more economic value than the initial investment cost, but the benefits took years to fully materialize and weren't immediately obvious during construction phases. The K-shaped economy narrative misses critical context. Critics frequently point to the K-shaped economy, where asset holders benefit tremendously while working-class individuals struggle, suggesting AI spending primarily helps the wealthy while exacerbating inequality. This narrative contains truth, but misses important context about how transformative technologies actually diffuse through economies. During early infrastructure build-out phases, benefits always concentrate among those directly involved in construction and those holding assets in related companies. This happened with railroad expansion, electricity deployment, telecommunications infrastructure, and internet build-out. The pattern is consistent. Early stages show concentrated gains, followed by broader economic benefits, as the infrastructure enables new business models and productivity improvements that eventually spread. The concern about job displacement from AI is legitimate, but requires historical perspective. The International Monetary Fund estimates approximately 60% of jobs in developed economies could be transformed or replaced by AI automation in coming years. That sounds catastrophic until you remember similar predictions accompanied previous automation waves, and what actually happened was job transformation, rather than mass permanent unemployment. Agricultural employment dropped from over 40% of the U.S. workforce in 1900 to under 2% today due to mechanization. Manufacturing employment declined dramatically due to automation. Yet overall, employment didn't collapse. Jobs shifted to new sectors, enabled by productivity improvements in agriculture and manufacturing. Service industries expanded. Technology sectors emerged. New categories of work appeared that didn't exist before. AI will certainly disrupt labor markets, and that transition will cause genuine hardship for individuals whose skills become less valuable. But the historical pattern suggests net job creation over time as AI enables new industries and business models we haven't fully imagined yet. The challenge is managing the transition period, not preventing the technology adoption. The geopolitical reality driving investment. There's another dimension that bubble comparisons completely ignore. This is fundamentally an arms race between the United States and China for technological leadership. Neither country can afford to slow investment because the other is accelerating. This creates different investment dynamics than purely market-driven speculation. Chinese companies and government entities are making similarly massive investments in AI infrastructure, perhaps even exceeding US spending when accounting for state-directed capital. The strategic implications of falling behind in AI capabilities span economic competitiveness, military applications, and geopolitical influence. This isn't optional speculation. It's strategic necessity from a national security perspective. That doesn't eliminate all risks, but it does mean investment timelines and risk tolerances operate differently than normal market cycles. When spending is driven partly by strategic competition rather than pure profit maximization, slowdowns become less likely even if near-term returns disappoint. The investment continues because the cost of falling behind exceeds the cost of temporary overcapacity. What actually threatens this build-out? The real vulnerabilities aren't the ones skeptics typically emphasize. The bubble won't burst because AI doesn't work. It demonstrably does work for numerous applications already. The risks are more mundane. Rising interest rates making debt financing expensive, prolonged economic weakness, reducing corporate cash flows available for self-funding, or regulatory interventions that slow deployment. If inflation accelerates significantly, forcing central banks to maintain high interest rates for extended periods, that changes corporate borrowing calculus. If labor markets weaken substantially, reducing consumer spending and corporate revenues, companies might slow infrastructure investment to preserve cash. If political pressures lead to restrictive AI regulations that prevent deployment at scale, investment could slow because returns become uncertain. But notice these risks are external to AI technology itself. The vulnerability isn't that AI won't deliver value, it's that economic conditions or policy choices might force companies to slow build-out even while technology continues advancing. That's fundamentally different from dot-com bubble dynamics, where the underlying business models were never viable regardless of economic conditions. The multiplier effect's just beginning. Here's what optimists emphasize that skeptics underestimate. We're extraordinarily early in the deployment curve. Every dollar invested in AI infrastructure creates cascade effects across numerous industries. Power generation and grid infrastructure must expand to support data center loads. Cooling technology must advance to manage heat from dense computing. Networking bandwidth must increase to handle data flows. Chip manufacturing must scale to meet demand. Each of these supporting industries employs people, generates revenue, creates intellectual property, and drives innovation that has applications beyond just AI. The infrastructure being built serves the broader digital economy, not just narrow AI applications. Even if some AI use cases develop more slowly than anticipated, the infrastructure still has tremendous utility for cloud computing, data analytics, streaming services, and countless digital applications. The supercycle terminology, suggesting this investment wave could continue not just for 2 to 3 years, but potentially 5, 7, or even 10 years, reflects recognition that we're building foundational infrastructure for the next economic era, not just a specific technology niche. This is comparable to the interstate highway system construction in the 1950s to 60s, or rural electrification in the 1930s to 40s. These weren't speculative bubbles. They were infrastructure investments that paid off through decades of economic growth enabled by the capabilities they created. So here's what's actually happening with AI infrastructure spending. Technology companies are making massive capital investments totaling hundreds of billions annually, growing toward trillions by decade's end, to build foundational infrastructure for the next economic era. Some economists worry this resembles the dot-com bubble, but the comparison fails on multiple dimensions. Today's companies have massive existing revenues and profits. The technology already demonstrates measurable productivity gains, and strategic competition creates investment dynamics beyond pure market speculation. Concerns about K-shaped economic benefits and job displacement are legitimate, but require historical context about how transformative technologies diffuse through economies over time. Early stages always show concentrated gains, followed by broader benefits, as infrastructure enables new business models. The real vulnerabilities aren't whether AI works, it demonstrably does, but whether external economic conditions or policy choices might slow deployment even as technology advances.
Every dollar invested creates multiplier effects across supporting industries, building infrastructure that serves the broader digital economy regardless of specific AI application timelines. We're in the second inning of a 9-inning game, constructing capabilities that will drive productivity growth for decades. Whether that optimistic vision fully materializes or encounters significant obstacles remains to be seen. But dismissing this as just another bubble misses fundamental differences in business model viability, cash generation, infrastructure utility, and strategic imperatives driving investment. The $2 trillion AI build-out isn't masking weakness. It's building the foundation for whatever comes next.